After adopting this girl, family discovers something shocking. I've always hoped to make a difference in this world, to bring goodness, peace, or healing to a world that often seems inundated with loss, hardship, and a vast array of obstacles that make life difficult for so many. When it came to the decision to adopt, it seemed like a no-brainer. I thought this was one way to make a difference, at least for one child. My husband, Adam, and I would open our home and our hearts to a child in need. What I didn't realize when I began this journey was that adoption was so much more than just these things. I didn't expect it to be all sunshine and rainbows, but neither did I realize the depth of heartache and loss adoption can entail, not only for adoptive parents, but even more so for the adopted children, like the one we were about to meet and welcome into our lives. Adam and I thoroughly researched at each step of the process in hopes of ensuring a proper and ethical adoption. You see, we were already parents to 4 biological children, so this was not about having another child or simply growing our family. For us, adopting was about sharing our abundance, our family, love, and home with a child who lacked these basic necessities. Not one part of this process was easy, even the decision to adopt internationally. We knew that there were American children, as well as children all over the world, in need of what we could offer. We eventually concluded, based on what we now see as a form of propaganda, that the greatest need was in many of the poorest countries. I remember reading that there were almost 3 million orphans in Uganda, and with that statistic in mind, and a bit more research, in October of 2013 we began the journey to adopt from there. We did piles of paperwork, got countless sets of fingerprints, and spent tens of thousands of dollars. It took a little over a year to get through all the formalities, but I was driven to get to the best part of this process, meeting the needs of a child. Eventually, we got to that point. In 2015, we welcomed a beautiful, strong, and brave 6-year-old girl named Namada into our home. There is no one blueprint when it comes to adoption, but I attempted to do my homework as thoroughly as any adoptive parent could. Still, nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. It took a little over a year and a half to realize the things our child was telling us were not adding up to the stories told within the paperwork and provided to us by our adoption agency, European Adoption Consultants Incorporated. In December, the U.S. State Department debarred the agency for 3 years, meaning it could no longer place children in homes. The State Department said it found evidence of a pattern of serious, willful, and grossly neglect, failure to comply with the standards of an aggravating circumstances indicating that continued accreditation of EAC would not be in the best interests of the children and families concerned. At first, I wondered if the conflicting information Namada was sharing with us reflected her efforts to cope with the trauma of being relinquished and abused. But I came to realize that she was telling me something vastly different and vastly more important. At many points during that year and a half, I had to suppress the compulsion to view the things she was telling me through my own lens. As all too often, that lens is clouded by one's own privilege and experiences. It was when I began to listen with this openness that I realized what she was so desperately trying to get me to understand. The child we had struggled for years to adopt was not an orphan at all, and almost everything that was written in her paperwork and told us about her background was not an accurate description of her life in Uganda. More than that, we eventually uncovered that she had a very loving family from which she had been unlawfully taken, in order, we believed and are convinced, to provide an orphan to fulfill our application to adopt. Devastated doesn't even begin to explain what we felt once we realized what had transpired to bring Namada into our family. Namada's mother was told only that Adam and I were going to care for her child while we provided her an education, which is an essential pathway to empowerment and opportunity in Uganda. So when this supposed chance to be sponsored by a wealthy American couple was presented to her, she felt as if she and her daughter had been blessed. She never knowingly relinquished her rights as Namada's mother, but once there was a verbal confirmation that we would adopt Namada, those on the ground in Uganda forged paperwork and placed Mada in an orphanage. By the time Mada's mother realized what was happening, that she never was going to see her child again, she was powerless to stop the wheels that were turning. After many months of uncovering the details in our case, I've also come to realize Mada's mother's experience is not uncommon within international adoption. I've heard plenty of adult adoptees say that they're completely against adoption, and I will not demean their voices or take away their rights to feel this way because it's a lifetime of experience that informs their opinions. But because of their strong voices, I've also seen a new wave of opened eyes among parents who adopt children, parents who understand the losses their adopted children have suffered, who listen to them, who rise to the huge obligations and high standards that adoption requires. Sometimes there are pictures of her at her grandmother's home, skipping about, smiling from ear to ear. Other times she's holding her baby sister, or walking home from school with her other sister. One of my favorite pictures thus far is the one of Namada sitting on the ground facing her mother, and her mother, the woman who gave birth to her, looks like her, smiles like her, and loves her more deeply than anyone else on the face of the earth, is looking back at the daughter she nearly lost.